I dropped my toolbox. My daughter-in-law had just backed out of the driveway for what she called a wellness retreat, and 30 seconds later, my granddaughter was standing at the top of the basement stairs on legs that hadn't held her weight in 6 years. Before I go any further, if you've ever had to protect your family from someone who was supposed to love them, hit that like button and tell me where you're watching from tonight. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 68 years old, a retired fire marshal, and I've spent 40 years reading rooms for danger before anyone else in them even smells the smoke. I trust my instincts. I trust what I can see with my own two eyes. But that Thursday morning, everything I thought I knew about my family turned to ash in about 4 minutes flat. It was 7:15. My son Michael had left before dawn for a work trip to Denver, and his wife, Renee, had just driven off in her little silver hatchback for what she said was a long overdue spa weekend with her sister. She'd kissed my cheek on her way out, told me not to overdo it with my granddaughter's morning stretches, and disappeared down our street in Cedar Falls, Ohio. I stood in the kitchen of the house Michael and Renee had built onto mine 3 years back, listening to the dishwasher hum through its cycle. For 6 years, this house had run on one unbending schedule. My granddaughter, Lily, had been 11 years old when a birthday party pool accident left her with what the doctors called an incomplete spinal injury, enough nerve damage that she never walked again. She was 17 now, her whole adolescence spent in a chair, her life folded into the ground floor bedroom we'd converted just for her. Renee had taken over every bit of her care. She'd quit her job to do it, or so she told everyone at church, every neighbor, every relative who'd ever ask. The sacrificing mother, the saint of Maple Street. I was just the grandfather who paid half the mortgage and drove Lily to her therapy appointments on the days Renee said she was too drained to manage it. I was pouring my second cup of coffee, enjoying 20 minutes of quiet before I had to start Lily's breakfast, when I heard it. A thump, then another. Slow, uneven, coming from the basement stairwell we'd built a chairlift onto for Lily's bedroom access. My old firefighter brain went straight to structural, a settling joist, the water heater kicking on, something mechanical. But the rhythm was wrong. Too deliberate, too much like footsteps. I set my mug down on the counter and walked toward the hallway, and there she was, my granddaughter, standing at the top of the basement stairs, gripping the handrail with both hands, her whole body shaking like a sapling in a windstorm. "Lily," I said, and my voice cracked right down the middle. I don't remember crossing the kitchen. I remember my hands were on her shoulders and she was solid and warm and upright, and none of it made a bit of sense. "Sweetheart, how you're standing. You're standing up." I fumbled for my phone in my flannel pocket, already thinking about calling 911, calling Michael, calling anybody who could explain to me how a girl with a documented spinal injury was on her feet in my hallway. Before I could unlock the screen, her hand clamped down on my wrist, and it wasn't the grip of someone who'd just relearned how to stand. It was fierce, desperate. "Grandpa, don't call anyone," she said, and her voice had a rasp to it I'd never heard from her, not once in 17 years. "Please, you have to listen to me right now. Lily, you're walking. The doctor said your injury was—" "Grandpa." Renee didn't go to her sister's. She said it flat, like she'd been holding the sentence in her mouth for a long time and needed to spit it out before it burned her. "She's not at a spa. She's downtown. She's meeting with a lawyer today, and tomorrow she's filing papers to have you declared unfit to have custody of me." I stood there in my own hallway, feeling the floor tilt underneath me the way it does right before a house you thought was sound turns out to be built on rot. "Lily, honey, that doesn't make any sense. Why would she— What are you even talking about? Custody? I'm not. This is my house." She's been telling everyone you're getting confused, forgetting things, getting aggressive. Lily's eyes darted to the front window, and I recognized that look I'd seen it 1,000 times on people I'd pulled out of burning buildings. The look of someone who has already decided the walls are coming down. I heard her on the phone with her lawyer last week when she thought I was asleep. She's telling him you're a danger to me, that you shouldn't be an emergency guardian if anything happens to Dad. She's setting it up so if you get removed as guardian, it's just her. Full control. Full access to the settlement money the pool company paid us. "Grandpa, we have to go. Right now." The settlement, $400,000, set up in a trust for Lily's ongoing care after the accident, with Michael and me as co-trustees until she turned 25. My hands had gone very still. "Lily, I need you to slow down and tell me how you're standing right now, because none of this—" "There's no time," she said, cutting me off. pulling at my sleeve with a strength that shouldn't have been in those legs. "She'll be back. Please, Grandpa. Get your keys." My phone buzzed in my hand before I could argue further. A text from my bank. "Unusual activity detected on your joint checking account. Access temporarily restricted pending verification." I read it twice. A cold, clean feeling settled into my chest. The same feeling I used to get walking into a structure fire when the smoke told you more than the flames did. I looked at my granddaughter, upright, terrified, telling me things that violated every fact I'd built my life around. And I made a decision the way I'd made 100 decisions on 100 fire scenes, not with my heart, but with the part of my brain that had kept men alive for 4 decades. "Get your jacket," I said. "We're leaving." I wrapped my arm around her waist. She was trembling so badly I nearly lost my grip twice, and we moved through the house that no longer felt like mine. Every framed photo on the wall, every piece of furniture Renee had picked out, looked different now, like set dressing in a play I hadn't known I was performing in. We reached the garage. Michael's truck, the one with the wheelchair lift we'd installed, sat there useless to us, since Lily wasn't in the chair anymore. But I went for my own old pickup instead. The '98 Silverado I kept under a tarp, because Renee said it was an eyesore. I hadn't driven it in over a year. I yanked the tarp free, threw it aside, and reached for the door handle. Locked, and the spare key, I remembered with a sick lurch, was in the kitchen key drawer inside the house. "There's no time to go back in," Lily said, watching the street through the garage's side window like she expected headlights any second. I grabbed a tire iron off my workbench, wrapped my jacket around my fist, and put the driver's window in with one clean strike, same as I'd done to 100 car doors trapping people in accidents over the years. I swept the glass off the seat, helped Lily climb in wincing and unsteady, and slid behind the wheel. No key meant no starting it the normal way, but I'd spent 4 decades around engines, and I knew my way under a steering column blind. I found the ignition harness, stripped the wires with my pocket knife, and touched them together until the old engine turned over and caught. The garage door groaned open at what felt like a criminally slow pace. I threw the truck into reverse the second there was daylight enough to clear the roof, and we shot backward out into the driveway just as I saw, 2 blocks down, a silver hatchback turning onto our street. We made it out the other direction, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Lily was crying now, quiet, exhausted tears, her hands pressed flat against her thighs like she still couldn't believe they were holding her weight. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she kept saying. "I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. I was scared. I didn't know if you'd believe me." "I believe you," I said, and meant it more than I'd meant anything in a long time, even though I didn't yet understand the half of what I was believing. We drove 20 minutes to a motel off Route 9, the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions, and once we were behind a locked door with the chain thrown, I finally let myself ask the question that had been eating a hole through me since the top of those basement stairs. "Lily, how long have you been able to walk?" She wouldn't look at me at first. She picked at a loose thread on the bedspread, and when she finally spoke, her voice was very small. "About 8 months, she said. "It happened slow. First just feeling coming back in my toes. Then I could wiggle them. I didn't tell anyone because—" She stopped. "Because why, sweetheart? Because every time I mentioned getting better in physical therapy, Renee would tell the doctor I was having phantom sensations. She said it happens sometimes with spinal patients, false hope, and the doctor, Voss. The one Renee started taking me to about a year ago instead of my old doctor. He started adjusting my medication every time I said something like that. New pills. He said they were for nerve pain, for muscle spasms. But Grandpa, after I took them I always felt so heavy, so slow, like walking through wet cement, even in my head. It got worse right after I told them I could feel my legs again. I sat down hard on the edge of that motel bed, my old fire marshal brain doing the thing it always did, sorting facts into a shape, and the shape it was making turned my stomach to ice. "Lily, I need you to think very carefully. Do you know what those pills were?" "I kept some," she whispered, and reached into the pocket of her sweatpants, and there in her palm sat 4 unmarked white capsules, the kind you'd never be able to identify without a lab. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a plastic motel chair with my granddaughter finally asleep on the bed beside me, and I thought about the settlement money nobody but Renee ever seemed to have direct access to, about the new doctor who'd appeared right around the time Lily started improving, about a wife who'd quit her job to be a full-time caregiver for a girl who apparently didn't need nearly as much caregiving as everyone had been told. By 4 in the morning, I had a plan. The kind of plan you build when you've spent your whole career walking toward the thing everyone else is running from. The first call I made, once the sun came up, was to my old army buddy Denny Ruiz, who ran a private toxicology lab out of a strip mall on the east side of Columbus and had done me more than one quiet favor over the years. I drove the 90 minutes myself, leaving Lily locked in the motel room with strict instructions not to open the door for anyone but me, and I put those 4 capsules on Denny's counter along with $300 I could not really spare. "Rush it," I told him. "Whatever this costs, whatever this takes, I need to know what's in these by tonight." Denny looked at the pills, looked at my face, and didn't ask a single question, which told me something about how bad I must have looked. "Give me till 6, he said. My second call was to my daughter, Casey, a paralegal who worked 80 miles away in Columbus for a firm that handled exactly the kind of guardianship and trust disputes I was suddenly neck-deep in. I told her everything, standing in a gas station parking lot with the phone pressed so hard against my ear it hurt. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "Dad, if what Lily's telling you is true, and if that trust fund is what I think it is, you need to get ahead of this today, not tomorrow. If Renee files first and paints you as unstable, a judge could grant her emergency guardianship over Lily before you ever get a chance to explain your side. You'd lose access to Lily, lose your say over the trust, maybe lose everything. Then tell me what to do. Get to a lawyer. Today. I'm calling Marcus Webb. He handled the Petrakis guardianship case 2 years back. He's sharp, and he owes me one. And Dad, start writing down everything. Times, dates, what Lily told you, word for word if you can remember it. Every detail matters." I spent that afternoon in Marcus Webb's office with Lily beside me, wrapped in a blanket, giving her account in a small, steady voice while a lawyer twice my size in a good suit took notes with an expression that got grimmer by the minute. By the time Denny called at 6 that evening, I already suspected what he was going to tell me. I still wasn't ready to hear it. "Walter," he said, and his voice had none of its usual cheerfulness in it. "These aren't nerve pain medications. There's a compound in here. It's not something I see in a legitimate pharmacy supply. It's a sedative neurotoxin blend, the kind of thing that would suppress voluntary motor function without showing up on a standard blood panel unless you knew exactly what to test for. Somebody's been dosing this kid to keep her paralyzed on purpose." I sat in my truck in that parking lot for a long time after I hung up, hands gripping the wheel, staring at nothing. 6 years. 6 years of watching my granddaughter be wheeled through a life that had, apparently, only partly been necessary, and for the last 8 months, entirely engineered. Marcus Webb worked through the night. By the next morning, he'd filed an emergency petition of his own for temporary guardianship in my favor, backed by an affidavit from Denny's lab and a sworn statement from Lily, and he'd made a phone call to a detective he knew in the financial crimes unit, a woman named Sergeant Adaora Bell who, it turned out, had already flagged some irregular activity connected to Dr. Everett Voss 6 months earlier, after another family had filed a complaint nobody had followed up on. "He's been doing this before," Sergeant Bell told me over the phone, her voice clipped and professional in a way that steadied something in my chest. "We think there might be at least one other family involved. If your granddaughter's willing to give a statement, and if that lab report holds up, we can move fast. But I need you to understand something, mister. Higgins moving fast means we need you and Lily somewhere safe today, and I need everything you have." We met Sergeant Bell at a diner off the interstate, out of caution, and I laid out every piece of paper I had: the bank alert, Marcus's filing, Denny's toxicology report, Lily's written statement across a sticky Formica table while my granddaughter sat pressed against my side. Finally, for the first time in 2 days, looking something like calm, Sergeant Bell read through it all without a word, then looked up at Lily directly. "You did an incredibly brave thing, telling your grandfather," she said. "I know it didn't feel brave. I know it probably felt terrifying, but it was." That afternoon, while Lily and I sat in a hotel room paid for with cash Casey had wired me, officers executed a warrant on Dr. Voss's private clinic outside Cedar Falls. What they found there, Sergeant Bell told us 2 days later once the dust had settled enough for her to talk, was worse than even I had braced for records for 6 patients going back 4 years, all with similar profiles: injury settlements held in trust, family caregivers who controlled medical decisions, and a pattern of medication changes that coincided almost exactly with any documented sign of improvement. Renee had been receiving payments from Voss for nearly 3 years, funneled through a shell consulting company, in exchange for keeping Lily on the protocol and keeping the trust's medical oversight committee convinced that Lily's condition was permanent and worsening, which justified larger and larger disbursements from the fund for specialized ongoing care that mostly ended up, according to the financial records Sergeant Bell's team pulled, in a joint account Renee had opened under a different last name. Renee was arrested at a Marriott outside Columbus, not at a spa, 3 days after Lily first stood at the top of those basement stairs. Dr. Voss was arrested the same afternoon at his clinic. The charges against them stacked up: fast fraud, conspiracy, and, once the state's attorney reviewed Denny's independent lab findings alongside the clinic's own suppressed records, attempted poisoning. Renee's own attorney tried to argue diminished culpability, tried to say she'd been manipulated by Voss. But the paper trail told a different story, one where she'd opened that shell account herself, 2 years before she'd ever met him. Michael flew back from Denver the moment I called him, and I will never forget the sound he made on the phone when I told him his wife had spent 3 years poisoning their daughter for money. It was not a sound I expect to hear from him again, and I hope I never do. He filed for divorce within the month. He didn't fight me on the emergency guardianship. If anything, he thanked me for moving faster than his own grief would have let him. It took the better part of a year for the legal side to fully resolve. The trust was restored and resecured under an independent financial guardian this time, with Michael and me both retaining oversight but no direct control, a safeguard Marcus insisted on and I was grateful for. Renee took a plea deal that kept her out of trial but put her behind bars for 11 years. Dr. Voss's medical license was permanently revoked, and his own trial, which is ongoing as I tell you this, could add considerably more time to whatever sentence he eventually serves. Lily, though. Lily is the part of this story I actually want to talk about. It took her 4 more months of real physical therapy, the honest kind, with a doctor Marcus's office vetted 3 times over before we let her near him before she could walk more than the length of a hallway without needing to rest. I drove her to every single appointment myself. I sat in waiting rooms with bad coffee and worse magazines and watched my granddaughter, inch by inch, week by week, reclaim a body that had been taken from her twice, once by an accident nobody could have prevented, and once by 2 people who should have protected her instead. Last month, I stood in the parking lot of Cedar Falls High School and watched Lily walk, not shuffle, not limp, walk, steady and sure, cane in hand for balance more than necessity now across the stage at her graduation. She found me in the crowd afterward, still in her cap and gown, and she didn't say anything dramatic. She just hugged me, the kind of hug that says more than any speech could. And I held on to my granddaughter in that parking lot and let myself cry for the first time since all of this started, not out of grief this time, but out of something that felt, finally, like relief. I think about those 4 unmarked pills sometimes, sitting on Denny's steel counter that night. I think about how close I came to unlocking my phone at the top of those basement stairs and calling for an ambulance instead of listening to my granddaughter, how close I came to sending her right back into a house with a woman who had every reason in the world to make sure I never asked another question. Here's what I've learned. If you're still with me, the people who hurt us worst are rarely strangers. They're the ones who've made themselves indispensable to our trust, who've built entire identities around being the one who sacrifices, the one who cares. That kind of performance is easy to mistake for love, especially when you want so badly to believe your family is exactly what it looks like on the surface. But love doesn't need to be defended with lies. It doesn't come with a shell bank account. If something in your gut tells you the story you're being told doesn't add up, trust that feeling, even when the person telling you otherwise is someone you've loved for years, especially then. If this story meant something to you tonight, hit that like button, subscribe if you want more stories like this one, and tell me down in the comments where are you watching from and what would you have done in my shoes. Stay safe out there, and take care of the people who can't always speak up for themselves.